The top 10% wage earners in the 50s paid a much higher percentage of their taxes in income tax then than they do now. And now people are saying that if we allow Bush's tax cuts to expire and the top tax bracket goes from 35 to 39, that suddenly that's a shift to socialism. It's ridiculous. The average American, if you add up all the taxes, federal income tax, state income tax, property tax, excise tax, sales tax, all the fees on your cell phone bills and your electric bill, you add up all the taxes, the average American pays 32% of their income in taxes. The top 1% wage earners in the United States pay 31%. I don't believe that's fair. I think people who make more money should pay a modest amount more in percentage of their income in taxes than the middle class. The middle class has been destroyed in the United States over the last 30 years. It's a great article here. This is the Financial Times, not a liberal newspaper, talking about goodbye American dream. Let me read something to you. Median wage stagnation. The annual incomes of the bottom 90% of US families have been flat since 1973. The bottom 90% of incomes have been flat. And chief executives of corporations used to make 26 times the median income in 1973. Now they make over 300 times the median income. And they don't have to report to their stockholders what their compensation packages are. There's another solution that I'm proposing. Simple solution, not government regulation, getting their hands into all the details. Pass a law that requires corporations to disclose to their stockholders in advance what their compensation packages are going to be for their chief executives. And then allow their stockholders to vote, a recommendation vote, on whether they approve it or not. Right now it's done in the back room, nobody knows what it's going to be. The board members of the board of directors of big corporations are sitting on each other's boards. This is documented. The conflict of interest is unbelievable, and they vote each other these huge bonuses. We've moved from an incredibly vibrant economy of entrepreneurism and small businesses to an economy owned by giant corporations.
When you talk about you guys were talking earlier about the mortgage crisis.
Yes.
Do you think that just simply reinstating Glass-Steagall?
That I support that. That would help. That would help. But the 30% rule would be even better. It would be even better. I've got a bunch of ideas. Our real unemployment level is probably 16, 17, 18%. They report 9 to 10%. But if you count people who are working part-time, who can't find full-time jobs, and people who've given up looking, the real unemployment is catastrophic. The way that you reduce unemployment is through what they're calling stimulus, but the right kind of stimulus. The $800 billion stimulus package was not the right kind of stimulus. That was giving money to the top, to the corporations, to businesses, to places like that. The way you stimulate job growth is by increasing spending by working people. So I've got a plan called Flip the FICA. The FICA tax is the most regressive tax you can imagine. If you make under $107,000 a year, you pay 6% of your income, paycheck gets taken out, and 7.65% total. Everything above $107,000 a year, you pay 0 of that 6%. So somebody who makes $10 million a year pays the exact same amount as somebody who makes $107,000 a year. People are struggling to pay their mortgages, and this hits small businesses particularly hard. The employer has to write a check to the government equal to the same amount that's taken out of your paycheck. Very few small businesses have employees who make more than $100,000 a year. So if we want to stimulate the economy, you do it through tax cuts for working people that are struggling to pay their mortgages. And small businesses, the commercial foreclosure rate is as high as the home foreclosure rate, and a lot of economists say that that's our biggest problem. So you flip the FICA, you turn it around. You say 0% on incomes below $100,000 and 7.65% on everything above $100,000. So people who make $200,000 a year would pay the exact same amount as they were paying. And the top 1% income earners who are paying a lower percentage of their income in total tax would be bumped up. And now they would be paying a higher percentage of their taxes, of their income and taxes, than the middle class is paying. And we would get more in line to what the tax structure in this country used to be back in the 1950s.
How do you pay for that though?
It's actually revenue neutral.
In what way?
If you change it from 6% on the top 107 and 0 above to 0 and 6, it's actually revenue neutral.
So it doesn't add to the deficit.
That's right. And you maintain the same Social Security benefits and Medicare benefits for everyone if you hadn't made the change. This is a great way to regulate the economy. It's a long, detailed plan that's on my website that we could talk about. You know, another thing we could do, public-private incubators for small businesses. This was done in Brazil. Connecticut actually has a state program that does this called Connecticut Innovations. We should have federal, regional incubator plans where people with a high level of income, there's still a lot of people out there making high salaries and huge capital gains, but they're afraid to invest their money in startup companies right now because they don't have any confidence in the long-term perspective of the economy. So you allow them to delay paying their income tax on that money if they put it into an incubator program, similar to the Connecticut Innovations Program. And so it takes the risk out of investing for them, because if they lose the money, they don't have to pay that income tax that they would have had to have paid anyway. But if they make money, you could even set it up where they don't have to pay taxes on any profit they make the first couple of years or something like that. We need to stimulate the economy through investments in startup company and through tax cuts for working people. And that would greatly reduce the mortgage foreclosure rate, the commercial foreclosure rate, and it would reduce unemployment back down to eventually full employment.
It sounds as if, and you know how the government works.
Yes, I do.
That we're just adding, adding to government. We're growing government. I mean, government, someone's going to have to administer these programs. So there's another layer of somewhere. It's not going to go get absorbed into what already exists. It would be, a new offshoot of some other agency, et cetera.
No, actually, I mean, it's still Social Security and Medicare taxes, so you flip it, but it's still the exact same government branch administering it. But you bring up a really good point. Another thing I'm very passionate about is simplifying our federal income tax code. I literally just spent 4 hours nonstop on the phone with the IRS a couple of weeks ago. I had to put an earbud in my ear while I was working because every 3 minutes they're required to come back on the line and say, can I put you back on hold for 3 minutes? Because I file a pretty simple tax form. I have one employer, I don't have a small business, and yet they sent me a letter saying I had made mistakes on my tax form. Even the simplest tax form now is ridiculously complicated with a ridiculous number of deductions. The AMT tax, we need to do away with the AMT tax. We need to do away with the marriage penalty. We need to do away with loopholes. Did you know that hedge fund managers get to count their commission income as though it's capital gains income? It's a loophole that was put in about 10 years ago. The Democrats promised that they would close that loophole in 2006, and they introduced a bill, but of course they added these poison pills to the bill that would prevent getting a majority of votes, so it's still existent. So they pay people who are making $10 million a year are paying a much lower percentage of their income in federal income tax than I am. And I am not even above that 107,000 threshold. Warren Buffett has a standing $1 million prize for anybody who can disprove the fact that he pays a lower percentage of his $1 billion of income in taxes than his secretary does because of loopholes in the tax code. I insist, I'm a pretty smart guy. I have a PhD in engineering from Stanford University. I've been teaching for 20 years. I insist that I can do my tax form with a pencil. And there are instructions in that tax code that I do not know what I'm supposed to do. The instructions are so ambiguously worded, I honestly couldn't figure out what I was supposed to do.
So are you advocating a flat tax?
Absolutely not. Not a flat tax, but doing away with almost all deductions, having 3, possibly 4 basic tax rates, tax brackets, and closing all these loopholes. It's kind of ridiculous. Did you notice, I don't know if you do your own taxes or not, did you notice there was a deduction if It was something like if you have a college student going to school in Nebraska, you got a special deduction. We're living in Connecticut. Why should that be in there? It's ridiculous. So I'm not for more government. I think government is too big. I think we should have frozen the spending on government agencies a couple of years ago. Most people right now have their incomes frozen, if they even still have a job. You know, businesses have been freezing activities. The federal government should have done the same, but that doesn't mean we should reduce spending. When we have unemployment this high, we need stimulus in the form of tax cuts.
So the Congressional Budget Office, in fact, I just saw it today, or yesterday, whenever it was, they have just come on out and have declared that the stimulus package did work. It did create jobs. You dispute that?
It was lousy bang for the buck. Absolutely lousy. I go into great detail on my website about what part of that bill I would have supported. Out of the $800 billion, I think I would have supported about $150 billion. We have $2 trillion of deferred infrastructure maintenance in the United States. I was worried about that before the recession hit. This would have been a perfect opportunity to deal with that issue if you wanted to implement a stimulus package like this. The percentage of the stimulus bill that was infrastructure was a relatively small percentage. I also supported the direct aid to states. States have a balanced budget requirement. When you have a big dip in the economy like this, you don't want states to lay off a bunch of teachers and firemen and policemen to balance the budget. It's the federal government's role, in my opinion, to help bridge the gap when states are having a really tough time.
You're referring to the works bill that was just passed that put teachers back in the classroom?
Well, I'm referring to the portion of the stimulus package
Okay.
that was direct aid to states. And I think we need to do more of that. But I think those two portions of it were only about $150 billion of the whole $800 billion. And a lot of the stimulus was not good bang for the buck. You don't increase spending of middle class people. I mean, if you think about it, if you're making $1 million a year and you get a tax cut that gives you an extra $10,000, is that going to change your spending a whole lot? I don't think so. But a family who's making $50,000 a year and they get an extra $3,000, that's going to make a big difference in their lives, and they're going to spend that money. That's how you create jobs. If you increase demand for services and goods, companies start to hire people again to provide those goods and services. So that's the kind of stimulus we need right now.
What about this, I brought it up to you, the bill that a couple of months ago, the Jobs Act, whatever its name was, to put teachers back in the classroom. Would you have supported that?
I think I probably would have voted for it, but I would have fought to try to change it. There's great room for abuse in a bill. The part of the bill that I was concerned about is we'll give you a tax break for new hires. Well, we all know that there's going to be ways around that where you lay somebody off and then you wait a while and you hire somebody and you call them a new hire. You know, you should just have this flip the FICA payroll tax holiday for small businesses for salaries under $100,000, so they don't have to go through all this paperwork and red tape to classify somebody as a new hire. I didn't like the way that was structured.
But what about the way they chose to fund it? They took money from the food stamp program. They took money from green technology so that they could balance the funding and pay for this without adding to the deficit.
Yeah, I did not support that. In fact, that's unnecessary. Warren Mosler has written a book called The 7 Deadly Innocent Frauds of Economic Policy, and I recommend everybody read this. If you Google it, everybody should read this, and every member of Congress should read this. It's very complicated, but it's the modern, oh shoot, this is terrible, the MMT. It's an economic theory called the modern monetary theory, as opposed to the philosophy of Austrian economics that still seem to think that we're still on the gold standard. And the point of MMT is that government spending is completely detached from government revenue. If you pay your taxes in cash, the government shreds it.